Grand Rising, Grand Arrival, Grand Return. Peace and blessings to the righteous and the repentant alike. I am Chief Sophia of the AmaruKhan Band of Indians, and these videos are going to be an introduction to daylight astrology. I'm going to make several different videos, and they're going to be covering different aspects of what I'm calling daylight astrology. Currently, the way astrology works is it's measured from the darkest point to the darkest point. And while this has been helpful in the past to get information out there and to make it more accessible to more people because people lived in areas where there was more darkness than light, now we are coming into the light, and therefore we need an astrology that explains how things work from the lightest point to the lightest point. Now, what does that mean in practical terms? I'm going to try to keep this really short. We are going to look at astrology that goes from full moon to full moon. Now, why are we using moons and not the sun? The sun moves in a very regular aspect. And we do use the sun to measure some things. But in the case of astrology, the sun moves on a more consistent pattern, while the moon moves in a more varied pattern. And so if you're going to use the sun to do your astrological calculations, it's always going to be the same. Like, you're just going to be doing the same thing every time the sun gets to a certain degree or whatever the case may be. And again, this is not all bad. It is a good outline or foundation for how things should go from day to day. But when you're trying to figure out how the energy is flowing, using the sun in that manner when it's a very consistent body is not going to give you as much information as the moon will. So, for example, if you were born at 10 degrees of Aries, when the sun gets back to 10 degrees of Aries, that will be your actual solar return. But when it gets back to the day that is, which is probably like around April the 1st, then that will be your birthday. So we're dealing with days, which have a different calculation than degrees. And when you're dealing with days and degrees, since they're so close, that's really, really difficult to tell the difference in the energy. But when you're going from full moon to full moon or new moon to new moon, then you have a chance to see how the energy plays out. So like in the example of the sun, if you're going from one birthday to the next birthday, well, that's a whole year. And it's a year that's kind of like when you were born, you start the essentially you start your year with nothing. So that's going to be the least effective way to calculate how much you've learned, how much you've grown, whatever the case may be. But if you're going from either new moon to new moon, then you can see from this new moon what energies came in that you were supposed to get by the next new moon. And because the next new moon is going to be in a different position, it actually allows you to continue to, it's built in that you gain more knowledge and more skills. Whereas if you go from year, like birthday to birthday, sun sign to sun sign, it's not necessarily going to be built in that you're going to be different, because remember, your solar return is when the sun comes back to the same position. The moon, you don't count your moon birthdays like that. I mean, you would have one every month, you know what I mean? Like every 30 days you'd have a lunar return, and that's basically what we're looking at. Even when the moon does come back to the same position as it was, that's a 19-year cycle. All the other planets are going to be in different places. It's not going to be exactly the same. And it's like that with the sun, but the moon is much easier to see how the energies are coming in. And because the moon is really who we are on the inside, our internal cycle, that's really hard to put words to. Whereas your sun sign is like your outside cycle, which you can describe in pretty good detail. So if you want to deal with, or rather, if you're a greedy magician who wants to feed on the energy of people, you will literally go with the lunar cycle, because that's what's going on the inside. And most people are not looking at what's happening on the inside. They're only looking at the sun, which is what is happening on the outside. And that is a huge miss. Energetically speaking, to not be looking at what's going on the inside. Now, what these dark magicians do is they go from the darkness to the darkness, because what's done in the dark always comes to light. But if your cycle goes from dark to dark, the light doesn't even configure into the way that you calculate your cycle. Meaning, and we have another slide where I'll be able to explain this in a little more detail, but basically the bottom line is there's no place for the light. If you go from new moon to new moon, there's no place for the light. And it's the same thing with people who are all love and light. If you go from full moon to full moon, there's no place for the darkness. So we have a hybrid system with this daylight astrology, which takes into consideration the darkness, because we want to be balanced. We don't want to be completely out of alignment, completely out of balance. And we don't want to leave any parts of ourselves on the table for harvesting. And that's literally what this daylight astrology is, because you bring the daylight to the darkness, and you also bring the darkness into the daylight. It's a cycle that continues to move around and around. And lucky for us, we have the opportunity to be able to really hone into this and turn this into something that could be very useful. So that's my introduction of daylight astrology. It's going to be several videos that accompany this, and they'll be listed in the description, and you're welcome to come and sort of see how this is coming together. It takes a lot of different pieces that come from different places and puts them all into basically like one place, so that it can be understood, it can be studied, and also other people can continue to research. So shalom, peace, and blessings, and we'll see you in the next video.